We're recording.
Welcome to the September 10th, 2025 Finance Subcommittee of the Brookline School Committee. The first item on our agenda is approval of the August 6th, 2025 minutes. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Any second?
I'll second.
Okay, Sarah, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Next item on the agenda is review of grant submissions. We have 7 of them. I'm gonna park those actually for a moment, just to give staff time to join. Let's go and look at the budget calendar real quick, and then we can come back to this because the budget calendar should be pretty straightforward, and that should give Karen also time to join. I just see Robin joining, but we'll let Karen join too. So if we look at the budget development dates, Betsy, I was gonna say, do you mind pulling them up? So these are the planned dates right now for those of you whose first year it is on school committee, or anyone in the audience who doesn't know. These dates are relatively static. I think these ones just they basically rolled forward from last year. So we have, and you'll have seen at least, I think, a copy of, or maybe you haven't seen this year's, but there's a very complicated, detailed budget calendar where we keep track of all the different things that are happening in the agenda. And out of those, though, we extract sort of these key events. So the first one is the initial budget request being ready. That would be February 5th. Then February 12th would be the school committee public hearing that's mandated by state law. So there would be a public hearing on that initial budget request. And then the school committee would vote to send that initial budget request to the town administrator. Now, the reason we have that vote is because per town bylaw, a budget needs to be submitted to the advisory committee by February 15th. And so we do that initial vote to send the initial budget request. That doesn't mean our budget's done. We're going to have, for anyone who's been watching this show for the previous seasons, you'll know that there is much happening after February. There's a lot of deliberation, a lot of change that happens. But again, the town bylaw sets an initial budget to be submitted, and so that happens. And that's similar to what happens on the town side. There is revision of the budget after those initial budgets are developed. So you'll see there's March 4th, Finance Subcommittee, March 5th, the School Committee. I guarantee you, if it's like other years, we'll have even more discussion. We had whole meetings this past year dedicated just to budget deliberation. I believe that's what the 4th and 5th will be, and then the 19th would be a possible vote. The idea being if we are able to come to a vote. And I think those are the only dates, right, Betsy?
Yes, we've always just had these 5.
Yes, I think we only had, I think maybe even one more, or we had one fewer and we added in the finance one, but yes, these are the ones we have. So this would be what we would be moving ahead to full committee, if the subcommittee feels comfortable, with these dates. And again, they're aspirational. These are rolled forward from last year. We didn't end up voting until April, I think, last year.
Mariah, can you share when outreach to, I think I remember that some outreach to the school community and other communities around the budget presentations are also aligned against this calendar in some way.
They're not. There's a lot of outreach about the hearing, and we certainly offer to go meet with communities. But those are not published in this. This is like
Got it. Okay.
Because we try and boil this down. Otherwise, we'd have like so many things are moving. We try and focus on these dates as like the official calendar as opposed to the many different things.
Okay, so this might feed that. This might inform some of that, right? Like that outreach
does,
work.
but I think this is my opinion, is that we shouldn't get overly fixated on the February 12th dates or any of these dates, because really, like, the budget conversation keeps going until town, like, it's not over till town meeting votes it, right? So it's important for us to all understand that it's an active discussion that whole time. Cliff and then Susan, and then I want us to hopefully vote these and return to the grants. You're on mute, Cliff.
Because this is possibly going to be an override year, and because the select board will have a deadline by which it must put something on the ballot. I don't think that conversations going into April are going to be uh, are going to happen just because it will be too late to put anything on the ballot. So that will end up having an impact here. And also, if there is any sort of proposal, as always, there'll be a no override budget needs to be prepared, as well as an override request budget. So I just say that this rolling this over it's probably not going to be quite the same next spring.
Yep. And we're going to have conversation about sort of the budgets we're hoping to see developed in the last item on the agenda. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment that it can't go too long or too deep into April either, because we have to get letters out if we are going to have a reduction in force. And so wrapping it up in March is important, even if it's not on the 19th, in order for us to do the work we need to do that results from whatever decisions are made.
Thank you. Okay, with that said, I will entertain a motion to accept these dates.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, Donna, how do you vote?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Jesse?
Aye.
And I will vote yes. And just to clarify, the motion is to recommend adoption to full school committee. Okay, now we're going to go back to the grants. Thank you for getting that done. And so we have 7 grants on the agenda for tonight. Cliff, is that a new hand or an old hand? Old hand, okay. So we'll start with, I think we'll just go through them in order if that's okay with people. So the first one is Title I for $734,413. Robin Benoit from Teaching and Learning,
Okay.
Office of Teaching and Learning is here to answer any questions that might be that we might have. One question I have, Robin, is the FY25 award over in the right-hand column is so much smaller.
Yes.
So
it is.
like, what's the story?
Not really sure. We did double check the amount, so that is the correct amount. But I think it also speaks to the fact that we don't necessarily know from year to year exactly what we're going to get. We kind of plan around what we've had in the past. There's no guarantee that we'll have this amount of money in Title I or any of the other Title ESSA grants moving forward. And so, when we're planning for their use, we want to, make sure that we're not putting things in the grant that we can't then also support in the budget if they need to be moved. So there's got to be some flexibility there. So we were very fortunate this year, but I don't know the answer to why it was more this year than it's been in the past.
And does this help us with our overall budget? Like, did we add new stuff or did we fund more stuff out of Title I so that we reduced our debt, our circuit breaker debt, I'll call it that. I see Susan nodding. So is that correct, Susan and Robin? Okay.
Yes. And
Okay.
Susan and I worked together on some of, how to use those places where we had flexibility to move some money into the Title I grant that we haven't had before because we just haven't had that amount of money. So.
Wonderful. Other questions from the subcommittee?
Yeah, I had a question, Maria. I'm
Please
sorry,
go
did Sarah
ahead.
start?
Nope, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question, Robin, had to do with the tutorial section, where it says that, yes, number 2 on climate and culture talked about tutorial coordinator program at BHS supporting students with academic and social emotional learning needs. So how does that relate to funding that METCO gets? And is this related at all? Is there any intersection with METCO program?
There's not necessarily intersection. There may be students that benefit from both supports, but it's like this is a grant that's really targeted towards students who qualify for Title I based on their needs, regardless of where they reside.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So this, okay.
Jesse,
So
tutorial is like a program where you go and you can basically, like, a teacher helps you check which things you've done. So it's like executive functioning support, and all students who, like, you have to get recommended into it, if I recall correctly, but it's a gen ed program for students who don't have an IEP or 504, but they need additional executive functioning support.
Wouldn't it be additional just tutorial work though, Maria, as well? Like a tutor helping them with their
It's
English,
not a
math?
tutor, really. It's like this
Oh,
class
okay.
where you can do homework and they help you make sure you're on top of stuff.
Mhm.
That's my own
Okay, 'cause
family's, like, that's my, a person,
your
my
experience.
description of it as a parent.
Yeah, and this has been,
Yeah.
I mean, this was funded last year through the Title I grant for VHS students as well. So this is not a new use for this funding.
All right, okay, all right. I mean, I'm just saying I was in a Title I meeting for a different school, not in this district yesterday,
Mhm.
and not with a parent, just in general. And this exact topic came up, which is why I'm asking it. And it did discuss having staff assist students who are having, say, an issue in a science, for example, basically providing, they don't have IEPs, but they're providing them tutorial education, not just coordination or homework checking. So that's why I was just trying to understand. I understand the double thing where a METCO student who might also be from a disadvantaged, low income family or disadvantaged in some way could benefit from both programs. So thank you for clarifying that. I just wanted to understand that this is also funding not only tutorial coordination, but in theory, tutors. But you're saying it doesn't. Okay.
In this case, it's the coordination.
Okay.
I think Robin, for the proportionate share for the private schools, they may choose to use some tutorial services differently than what we have.
Right.
in the grant.
Thank you, Susan. That could be. Okay. Yeah.
Sarah?
This isn't a question, just a commentary. I really found the descriptions to be very helpful and the related activities, having it right there, and then being able to go down and get more description in the later pages. So I just wanted to thank you for all of that. It really helped me understand.
Me too. I really liked the changes, the tweaks that have been made to the cover page. Seeing the FY25 award number, I mean, obviously that was the first question I had, but having just the summary of activities was really nice because there's so much detail in the backup, and having that boiled down summary was lovely. So yes,
and I think that that's the way that we want to be using our subcommittee time, is having the time to read through it ahead of time and generate the questions. And it just really makes these conversations that much more interesting. So thank you.
Are there any more questions on Title I, or can we move ahead to Title II?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a
Oh, go
couple
ahead.
questions.
Yep, go ahead.
I know you like to move through the agenda, but
I just want to leave lots of time for the conversation about guidelines.
yes. First of all, I want to say hi to Robin. I'm sorry I'm on the train. I'm commuting home from work. So I don't have my camera on, but thank you and welcome. And I'm hoping you don't mind. I'm the newest school committee member to the finance subcommittee. So if I have questions, and a lot of questions, it's because I'm trying to understand how everything works and hopefully get to a place where I'm more fluid in some of these topics. But I was hoping specifically on that first grant. Can you talk about the high dosage? I think it was the high dosage tutoring and literacy, what program you're using. And also, I think on one of the pages, there was some discussion of after school supports and what those supports might look like.
So I think that's a place where we're working with each individual school. The high dosage tutoring is something that we can take advantage of contracts through DESE. And there are a number. We haven't identified a specific one yet, but the money allotted into the grant would allow us to access some of that. And part of that is it hadn't been planned for in thinking for this grant in the coming year because we were anticipating a much smaller number. But with the larger number, it allowed us to access more resources. So those high dosage tutoring, so if I think about the ones in early literacy, for instance, they might be students that are participating in that after school program that's part, the opportunity, and or be accessing it throughout the day. But it sometimes it's done virtually, sometimes it's accessed in a small group or individually. So just looking at the different providers. So that's something that we would like to take advantage of as part of the grant because we now have a little bit more funding in that space.
And those are all phonics based?
I would have to look more into it. It's something that as I worked with Karen, that was identified as something that could really benefit our students that may need more.
Right. Okay. And if you have an idea of what is that what after school supports would also include, or what else might after school supports include?
I think again, I think that it's really building by building, like what that looks like. So I hear your train.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna mute.
That's okay. That's all right. I just, it threw me for a minute. That's okay. So I think in looking at the plan, because there had been some thinking done ahead for the title grants in the year prior. And so I'm assuming that the Office of Teaching and Learning had worked with the principals at the various schools to kind of think about their program. This first step is getting the grant in and getting it approved. And then as we move forward, we'll work with them, knowing what we were able to get approved, and then think about what that looks like moving forward throughout the year. So it's not something that's already underway. And it may look slightly different at each of the particular, I think you're talking about specifically the 3 elementaries or the 3 K-8s. It may look slightly different at each school.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions on Title 1? Okay, why don't we go ahead to Title 2? So that is for 135,321. And this is about, I think, professional development for teachers, and you can see that there are several related activities below. Betsy, do you mind scrolling a little bit further? Any questions for Robin, or Robin, anything you want to highlight for the committee before we get to questions?
So this is just a place where it allowed us to fund some of the professional development, specifically related to some of our goals and our bigger work as a district. So even just thinking about our work with the new teacher center, that's continuation of work we've been doing for a few years that really supports our work with MTSS. It supports some of our mentors and instructional coaches. And then it also can potentially support some of our professional learning in other targeted areas relative to our strategic plan.
Okay, any questions from the subcommittee on this one? Okay, we're gonna keep going then.
I'm sorry, I have a question. I think it falls here, but I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, is this where the equity leads fall?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about about that work more generally? And then would we have access to some of the training materials that they're using? And I'm also curious, like, are equity leads then being organized under your office, since the Office of Educational Equity has been eliminated?
So again, this is work that's a continuation from last year, and I think it was really important to continue that work. Given that I'm in an interim position, our Office of Equity is no longer, and some of that work falls under OTL. And so the planning for that was really done in the spring of last year, of thinking about continuing this piece in the grant. And so the people that were in those roles were trained last year. So.
But what is the funding being used for? Like, what are they getting the stipend for?
So I think that it's just continuing that equity work within their buildings and supporting teaching and learning from an equity perspective.
Definition of the training. But are you supervising them, or who's supervising the work? I'm still confused on that.
Well, ultimately, I think it would be under my office. So.
Questions from the subcommittee on Title 2?
So I'm sorry, would we have access to some of that curriculum? I think this also predates you, Robin, but
right.
There was meant to be a framework that was developed to evaluate resources after October 7th, because there was a little blip, we shall say, in what PSB disseminated. Since that framework doesn't exist at the moment, who will be looking into some of these resources to ensure that we're not causing harm unintentionally to other communities?
Well, I think honestly, I would have to come back to you with some of those answers, as I'm still trying to learn all of the history of what's gone in the last year. But I think it was my responsibility to ensure that if the planning was done, that this was at least put in the grant on the front end.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. If you can also at some point circle back to us so that I can have a better understanding of what that supervision might look like or what the metrics look like for success and for the equity leads, that would be helpful to me.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. Can you keep going, Betsy? Okay, next is Title III, and that is for 117,330, and this is for English language learning. And you can see the related activities are below. Robin, anything you want to say before we open up to questions?
No, this portion of the grant is largely outlined by Mindy, our Director of English Language Learning. And it goes to support some of our, even summer programs that support learners like our Star Academy over the summer. So that's a big portion of this.
Any question from anybody here on this?
I'm just really appreciating the through line with this. Robin, you're new, but obviously you've read the strategic plan, and I can see the evidence of it in everything that's written here. So it's the level of detail is really helpful.
Any more questions or comments from the committee? Okay, then let's go on to Title IV. So that is for 24,475, small dollars, but half of what it was last year, just pointing that out. Robin, anything you want to say? You said this is already rolled into the other activities that were described above, correct?
Right. So this we have the option with Title II and IV to roll the Title IV money into the Title II portion. The goals of them are aligned, and so it made sense with the small amount to roll it into our Title II because all of those actions kind of came together for us.
Great. And I think we'll then go on to IDEA, which is next. So I have one question. The FY25 award that is here, were we projecting? I just can't remember. Did we project for 26 that it would be equivalent to 25?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're pretty close to what we thought because it's within a rounding error. Okay. Karen, do you want to talk us through IDEA before we get to questions?
Sure. So on the very good news side, the IDA grant is approved it's gone through the district. It's been approved by DESI, and it is just waiting for Bella's signature and then obviously school committee approval. So that's always very exciting. So again, the IDA grant, as you can see, supports students with disabilities. There are two areas this year one area that is new, as many of you know, we were cited for disproportionality. And so part of that is then 15% of your IDA grant is required to go to what they call CCEIS activities, which is early intervention activities, in which the money needs to be used targeting your population for which you've been cited for disproportionality, but also can be used for general ed prevention and intervention services. And so a lot of that money parallels, and you heard when we presented around the literacy work, it's really coherent with the work that we're doing around literacy and supporting some of the general ed OTL literacy work sort of in a very coherent way, which is where you need to identify, when we did root causes. Our disproportionality was in the area of over-identifying students who identify as Black or African American in the category of specific learning disability, which really looks at, when you look at root cause, what's happening at the general ed instructional level that we're getting or we're referring students to special ed at disproportionate rates, and we're finding them eligible at disproportionate rates. So that's that piece that's new in this year's IDA grant. You would not have seen that last year. This is actually the second time we were cited for this in 2020. So you would have seen it in those grants. We came off it, and now we've been cited again. This is for 2 years, so you'll see this again in next year's grant. So when you get cited, you're required to take 15% of your IDA funds and use those over 2 years. The other area that the IDA grant funds is equitable services. And these are services for students who are enrolled in private schools in Brookline. They do not have to be residents of Brookline. And or students who are homeschooled, obviously residents of Brookline with disabilities. And so that's the other piece that the IDA grant funds, is those equitable services, which is really part of the federal IDA mandate. In Massachusetts, families also have an individual entitlement to services, so you can get services both as a services-only student at your local school, but you're also entitled to this additional federal equitable service entitlement, and services are delivered at the private school. So Jesse, when you were referring earlier to being at a meeting, it might have been that kind of a meeting where students are getting services in the private schools, funded by the district and facilitated in many cases in partnership with the private schools and private school vendors. So it's really a collaborative relationship. We meet with the private schools 3 times a year and really have to do, it's a pretty thorough, robust process around consultation, really looking at their needs. We can also provide non-IEP related services that support students with disability to private schools. So for example, this year, one of our private schools has asked us to provide professional development for their teachers on their professional development day. So we are going to do that. And we also obviously then provide the direct services. I'm going to pause because I've said a lot, just for maybe any questions before we carry on.
I have a couple of big picture questions.
Yeah.
First quick picture question is, so just to confirm, OAF and OSS are in agreement on this submission, and we are not in the situation we were last year where we ended up being overcommitted financially due to a miscommunication on IDEA. We're good this year.
We are good.
Okay, that's great. And do I recall correctly that that our FY25 IDEA was being audited? Am I remembering right?
Correct. That is correct.
Has that been completed yet or not yet?
It has not. We've hopefully submitted our final submission a couple of weeks ago, but it is still under audit.
Okay. Those were my big picture questions about IDEA. Any other questions from the subcommittee on IDEA?
Yes, sorry. I'm trying to hit the unmute button on my phone and it's making me crazy. Karen, thank you so much. I think maybe I might have missed this, but also I feel like I'm taking in a lot of information, so I apologize
No worries.
if I'm repeating something. But I remember there was discussion last year about whether positions could be funded by the IDEA grant or not, or there was some conversation that I never quite understood.
Mhm.
How does that relate to any of this grant funding?
So there are positions funded in this grant as well. One of the issues with the IDA grant is not to supplant. So you can support positions, but you can't use your IDA funding to supplant a position that should be funded with the general fund. So that's the critical piece. But there are positions funded that were agreed upon, the positions that were put in the budget, that if you go back to your budget book and you'll see were identified through the budget process as being funded through the IDA grant, are funded through this IDA grant. So some of the areas that I can highlight, ESY is almost solely funded through the IDA grant. So all the teachers and paras and salaries and some of the materials are all through the IDA grant. So it's actually a large a large percentage of the grant, not a large percentage, but that gets funded through the IDA grant. And then the piece that actually we're very excited about, and that you will hear more about tomorrow as well, is we have also kind of reignited the our literacy work, certainly as you've heard on the general ed side, but in parallel on the special ed side, there's funding in the IDA grant around Wilson. We did a training over the summer. We've started a 2-year program to make sure that we're training all our special educators in Wilson and also supporting many of our Wilson educators who have been trained and are ready to get certified. We've also introduced, and it's also funded through the grant, the same thing around Orton Gillingham, around OG. This year, we're going to be doing coaching. So this was a lot of special education teachers are going to be coached. And then next year, again, also through the grant, we will also be supporting our special education teachers to be getting certified in OG. And so that's really a kind of exciting work that we've been able to fund through the grant. In terms of just your direct questions, as I said, so the ESY, you know, all of those staffing positions are funded through the grant. There is on the 262, which is merged this year, you may have noticed the pre-K grant used to be separate. It used to be a 240 and a 262 grant, which is the pre-K. The 262 is still there, but it's merged, so it's all in this grant proposal. Our 262 pre-K special ed grant funds a specialized paraprofessional support position, and also we have equitable services there because we have a private pre-K with students with IEPs. And so that's where the combination, as you can see, it's identified separately here, but it's that 40,000 is in the actual IDA grant as one merged grant. And then there's some other positions. It funds 1 or 2 positions in the Winthrop House Middle School program. But it's all of those, I think, as people had asked, were aligned to what had been agreed upon in the budget process. So then there will be no sort of staffing issues or challenges around the IDA grant.
And then how does that relate to the, congratulations, by the way, like that's amazing that you're bringing in additional coaching and all the literacy work that's happening in special education. I think there's a huge amount of students that will benefit from that. How does the conversation about ESY, I think it was my first finance subcommittee meeting, there was some discussion about ESY staffing and the rates of pay for ESY staffing. Is that addressed in this ask?
Yeah, the ESY staffing rates in the past, in the 2025 IDA grant is very similar to the FY26 grant. So it's based on the current agreement around rates.
Okay.
I thought what Donna was referring to, though, Karen, was some discussion about the fact that the rates weren't the same everywhere. Something like that.
I think you may be talking about the issue around coordinator stipends. Is that what you're referencing?
That's my guess. We've sorted out, I think we have a pretty equitable staffing rate because it goes by per diems of their actual rates. There's other positions which have questions, and I think that is something that will need to be sorted out this year.
Yeah, and on that is something that Robin and myself are going to meet closely on early in the fall, because as you know, last year it was done very much at the end of the year, which is not particularly helpful. And so we want to make sure that we've had that meeting so we can make that recommendation around stipends collaboratively, making sure there's equity across OTL and OSS to the best, of our abilities based on where we get the funding from. But that also we put that on before January, right? So that it's very much in the budget process. So we already have that issue to really try and look at that kind of equitable stipends piece in terms of that. And we've done some work on the special ed side, really recognizing that actually that all the different programs, even within special ed, are not the same. And so really trying to look at making sure, again, they're equitable across special ed, but they're also equitable across the district in terms of summer work.
So Mariah, you have that noted for a later meeting date.
Yes,
Thanks.
in the calendar, yeah. Last year we talked about doing it in the fall, and then there were reasons and it didn't happen. It got pushed to later, but everyone agrees it really
we'll
needs
do
to
it.
be in the
Good.
fall.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, we'll do it. That's great.
yes. I'm going to call on Elise, who is one of our new colleagues from Advisory School Subcommittee. Welcome, Elise. I think this is your second meeting joining us. And go ahead and comment.
Hi, thank you very much. I just had a simple question. Just in terms of the grants, are there links for us to be able to go through and read those grant applications? So we
They're
can better.
actually in this packet, which is posted online. And so if you go through, you'll see all the applications there.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Yeah, this
Apologies.
packet, no, it's okay. This packet, it's 85 pages long, so yes, knock yourself out. But we look at it in advance and it's posted online so you can see it as well. At your
Okay, thank you.
when you're looking for some bedtime reading.
Right?
Okay, so we're gonna move ahead. I think Karen already covered the DESI, the 40,000. She said it was rolled in. So the last one, unless there's any other questions on IDEA, the last one is the BEF grants. And so I think it would be helpful, Betsy, if you don't mind just scrolling down to the very last page so people can see the breakdown of the 4 or 5 items that are being proposed for funding.
There you go. Yeah.
Yep. So this is 42,100, if I recall, for some conference attendance for the ideas lab, I think they called it, for the training for the educators in equity, and then for some universal design and membership in the Urban Collaborative. Karen or Robin, is there anything you want to add to what's written here?
It's just something to be aware of. There is another pending grant request that sort of came in this week that is still growing through the review process at the BEF. We actually requested that they allow us to put these forward today so that we can then move in terms of getting some of this work started. Certainly the UDL work we're contracting out, and obviously everybody's booking up their schedules. And so they very generously agreed to do that. So once they have got the other grant, which is really around PD, around our literacy work in OTL, and Robin can jump in to add anything to that, they will come back with that amount. So you'll see that this bottom line, the total here, is different from the original total. I'm not sure if you saw the original total, because a piece of that, some of the work that we aren't doing has been set aside, and they're going to review the grant request coming in from OTL for literacy PD. So there's one potential grant that will come back to this committee, but we did want to try and move forward with the other ones today, because it'll be a 3 to 4 week process by the time that's gone through their process.
Okay. Any questions from the committee on BEF? I see Jenny Rothman is also here from BEF. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us. Okay, it looks like no comments. So with that,
No.
oh, you have a question, Donna. Go ahead.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So are the, well, I'm gonna take a step back and ask a more general question and then ask about the BEF. But and I think, Susan, you're going to tell me that this is all covered in the grants, but if there is any classroom like subs that are needed as a result of this time, then that's already accounted for in the grant request itself. Is that right? Like if teachers have to step out of the classroom to do any of these trainings or coachings or anything like that, and it requires a sub, that's already covered in here?
I can't answer the question for the leading culture and instructional change. I didn't make that proposal, but in general, typically with grants, we include that.
Okay, but more generally, even in the other grant requests where there would have been, if there's training that's needed or the educators are doing any kind of coaching or training outside of the classroom, if it was happening during classroom time, then there would be sub time assigned in the grant request. Is that right? Do I
It's
remember
not-
correctly?
I don't think it's a hard and fast rule.
Mm.
I think that some grants include that and other grants do not.
So if it did, if we were reviewing some of these grant requests, Karen or Robin, like if you were accounting for subtime, would you have put it in the grant request?
We would.
We would have
We would.
outlined it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So that was one of my questions that I wanted to make sure. And then the other thing was more generally about, I know we talked about stipends, but is it also safe to assume that any stipends that are mentioned in any of these grant requests are paid out at the rates that are in that memo, Susan, that you distributed, I like want to say in the spring?
The memo, the contract, right?
The memo with the pay rates, which I
Or
think
the
is off
contract.
of the contract, yeah.
Right, the non-aligned rates. The
Yes.
question is, Susan, do all of these align with the non-aligned stipends, doc, or like workshop rate?
If the work applies to that body of work, then we would use those rates. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Conversely, to ask Donna's question another way, are there stipend rates articulated in these documents that the school committee has not otherwise approved? No.
No.
Okay, great.
Mariah, I think you need to follow me around all day. Can you arrange that?
Okay, great. I'm gonna make a motion for grant approval. Is there a
Oh,
second?
wait, no, sorry. I do have a question specific to the BEF grants.
Go ahead.
Is the 22 seats for educators for the ideas training, is that separate from the stipends for the equity leads? In other words, is there some overlap in those educators, or these are totally different educators?
These could potentially be different educators, correct, Karen?
Yeah.
So
This would include, and part of this, when we looked at the grants with principals, this would include principals attending the IDA's training. So it's a much larger group. It's really open to, principals, vice principals. There was a pretty robust interest in the district doing it this year at the leadership level, at the educator level. So that's sort of what the IDA's PD involves.
And so does that $14,000 cover the cost of the seats, or it's like also includes stipends to cover time to participate in the training?
It covers the cost of the seats.
And do they also receive stipends for their time?
In general, it's not, and again, just historically, it's not often during the working school day in terms of when the trainings are. Sometimes they do them over the summer. So it really depends when they run the training. But in general, we have, and I don't know, Susan, you can speak more to past practice with the IDA's training. They haven't necessarily pulled people out of the classroom. But we actually, in terms of this training, there's things that are coming up in the spring. There's things in terms of summer work and then ongoing work with it. So Susan, I don't know if you know historically when it's, to answer that question specifically.
I would say that not all PD that we offer is offered with an accompanying stipend for
Right.
release.
Right.
In fact, I would say that is less typical. Staff are required to maintain certifications and to keep themselves current in their practice, and we're not required to provide stipends to them if they're just advancing their practice. And I would say that in many cases, the professional development opportunities and professional growth opportunities that we provide, we do not provide stipends for. If there is some kind of a work product, as in the equity lead situation where they're actually doing work that and then are required to stay after school to do that work in service to providing resources to their colleagues, then in those cases, we would typically offer a stipend. Some of those stipends, as Mariah mentioned, are baked into collective bargaining agreements, and others, if they're recurring, not just like a one-time thing, if they're a recurring type of a stipend, then we have that non-aligned document that we bring forward for you to review and approve in those cases. From time to time, we will have stipends that are one time for a specific purpose that's not recurring. And I can't say that those are always included in either a CBA and or the non-aligned stipend document, because they don't live on.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I actually didn't realize that we don't always stipend for PD, so that's useful for me to know. And I'm going to go back to my earlier question with the equity leads. Is there any assurance that someone can give me that the materials used for this training are materials that are going to be reviewed so that there is not harm unintentionally caused to other communities?
It's a third-party vendor. It's not from us. And
right, but we're paying for it, to pay for our teachers to go do the training.
What do you mean by third party, Sarah?
I just want to be clear that the ideas training is made by an organization. You can go online and read their commitment to what they do. And it's not Public Schools of Brookline.
But
I guess that's obvious.
It's under the Mass Association of School Superintendents, the ideas work. So it's very integrated with the work that Daisy is committed to across the district as well as multiple districts. But you can go onto their website and see the kind of work that they do.
That's MASS.
Yeah.
MASS, Karen?
If you look at, I'm just kind of Googling it to see the.
Yeah, okay.
If you go onto the ideas.
Well, this is, but that's different than the equity leads thing. I see what that is. That's in the BEF grant. But I guess because Donna was asking about the equity leads that are in the Title II section, I was confused by where we're looking. I'm not sure. Are you well, okay, so let's back up for a second, Karen. This BEF grant is not related to the 14 stipends for equity leads.
Correct.
This is different, right? So Donna's question, I thought originally, was on page 2 of 10 of the IDA of the Title II Part A. It mentions 14 stipends for equity leads at each school, and they'll provide PD, meaning the way it's written is the equity leads are going to be providing.
Can I interrupt for a
professional
second?
development.
Why are we doing this? What is happening right now? Like, I've gotten lost at what we're trying to determine. Are you asking a question about this? Because we've already moved on from Title II. Was there an actual question here? Or are we trying to disambiguate ideas versus equity leads?
I thought that,
I'm
Donna
really
asked.
conscientious of the time. It's 5:50. We have 40 more minutes, and the most important item from the agenda is still ahead of us.
Well, this is important to me too. So
that's fine. I don't understand the question. I'm trying to understand what you are trying to do.
Similarly to what I asked about the material for the equity leads, can I have some assurance that someone will look through the material, because we don't have a framework to assess whether material is causing harm? And in the past, that has happened, and that has happened specifically with some of the anti-racist.
Okay, so Robin can take that as an action item like she did for the equity leads content, correct?
And
thank you.
Mariah, just quickly again, because this is Mass Association of Superintendents, the content of the ideas work is being highly vetted.
That's fine then, it'll be easy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we'll look forward to seeing it. That's good.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Well, you're not necessarily going to see it, Jesse. The agreement was that Robin was going to look and make sure she's good with it, and that's great, right?
Right.
I think
Exactly. Thank you.
And if it's publicly available, wonderful too, but we're not going to ask our staff to pass it all on, just to make sure that they feel confident that it represents the values that we as a community would like to have our materials include.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion again for approval of the grants. Is there a second?
Are we voting them all as a bundle?
We are. Unless you want to make a motion to separate something out.
I will second.
Okay. Jesse, how do you vote?
Yes.
Donna,
I'm gonna abstain until I get
Sarah?
the responses.
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay. Next we're gonna go to,
With Ada, do you mind to
sorry.
log me into
New
my
member.
Yes, exactly. They can't see you.
They could hear me though.
They can hear you, it's true.
Yes, we can. I love that voice.
Okay, so the final item on the agenda is the guidelines for the budget. Last year's format was included in the packet. That followed a format that I think we've used for the past at least 2 years, if not 3 years. And that was going to multi-year guidelines because we in the past they had been single year, but we wanted to be a little bit more forward thinking in how the budget was going to be planned, and what things we wanted to see. And I guess the question this year is, like, that document could be the structure. That document doesn't need to be the structure. Obviously, it's a different year, as we alluded to earlier. There's going to be possibly an override put on the ballot by the select board. And so how do we want that reflected in the document? I think it would be very valuable for staff to provide their input as well. And I personally see this conversation as tying to the conversation that I think we're going to have tomorrow at school committee about what is the ask that's going, or what's the ask that the schools are going to be presenting to the expenditure and revenues committee.
Study committee, yeah.
Right. So what are the things that we want to see in this ask? I've heard, and I know Bella is logged in. I don't know, Bella, if you're here, like if you're actively listening at this, there you are at this moment. I wonder, I heard secondhand, I think, that you made some comments as well at expenditures and revenues about what you were thinking about, for example, level funded budget. Am I remembering right?
Are you asking if I made comments on the guidance, on the proposed guidance?
No, but I see all of these things, I guess, coming together because the guidelines are going to be sort of, what do we want to see in the budget? And
I
so,
see.
for example, some people have said that we should be requesting a level funded budget as one of the options presented. And I've heard that you think that that's, and so I think, again, like, we want to sort of get this feedback before the school committee sort of makes its request. Are we going to say that there should be a level?
I assume that so we will build the budgets that the school committee asks us to build. And I would assume one would be a level service.
Yes,
That's not
level service, not
funded.
level funded. Sorry.
Level service. And
Yeah.
so there was assumption, there was an assumption that there would be level service. And then we would have to present a non-override budget. And also this presumes that there is even the possibility of an override budget, that we would have to create level service, non-override, and an override budget. And I say that because I don't know that if it were a non-override budget that we can maintain level services. So we would create a level services budget. It may exceed a non-override budget number, right? And
I would presume it would.
I would also hope that we would also be able to propose to you possible improvements to program for the purpose of really improving equity for all our students. And so what you're committed to in the current year in the literacy implementation and the support of MTSS is about providing programming for all students. So it may be that we would consider some program improvements. And whether you would agree they should be part of any budget moving forward would be for you to decide. But I think we would probably make some proposals. So whatever guidance you decide, again, I would assume a level service budget, a non-override budget, possible override budget that may include all of that plus possible program improvements.
I'm going to call first on Sarah, who's on the subcommittee, and then I'll go back to you, Cliff.
So being on the study committee, I want to validate that those 3 budgets would be very useful to us. And I guess right now I'm just speaking more as myself because, you know, there's 8 other members that have to weigh in on this. But I would love if when you look at what those additional programming or additional asks that you would put into that sort of high level budget.
Sarah, can I make a little suggestion on a tweak of your language?
Yep.
Which is you're not talking to Bella right now, you're talking to your co-members of the finance committee about how we might want to talk to staff about it, okay?
Right. So my recommendation to you guys, being an individual, not representing all of us, is that we would ask Bella to make that high level budget, to make it within reason. And the sort of guidelines that I would follow would be initiatives that we've already started that might need to be continued by having additional funding, but kind of separate out things, not address things that are completely new.
Cliff? You're on mute again.
It's probably what you want to hear. It's nothing. Let me just take a couple of minutes in and try to frame for folks the conversation and the reason that the committee is asking for a level services budget. And they're asking for that first. Today, the committee has heard that both the town and the schools have structural deficits. But we don't know what that means. And so the way that we believe we need to start our analysis is to say, okay, tell us what the level service budget is. Okay, taking FY26 and just rolling it into FY27. I'll pick up Sarah's comments in a second. And with those expense budgets, then we're going to have the overlay of currently the town revenue projections so that we can then start with, okay, here are the holes. All right. And that is just a good starting place because it really helps frame for everyone who's been listening to presentations, but not having any data to go along with them, for everyone to have that base. Once we have that base, you know, there's some stuff that we can do, but clearly both the town and the schools are going to, from that point forward, build their own budgets, and those budgets will have to include, as they always do, an override situation, and then the override budget, which is going to be the ask. But having that base really will help inform the committee, and that's why the committee has asked for that. I just wanted to give a little context. And to Sarah's point, you know, if programs have been started, then clearly it's part of the service roll forward. I think the issue for some people might be, and it's something to consider if you can actually show it. And let me use the rollout of the new English language program with the not English language.
Literacy program.
Literacy, thank you. All right, so it started with K-2, right? And then it's being expanded, correct? It would seem to me that that would be something that, yes, you're going to continue with that, but I think it would be helpful to show what the incremental impact is of continuing that, because it's the same service, but it's sort of expanded at the same time. And it's a little fuzzy, but I think it would be helpful for people on the committee. By the way, I'm not a voting member, so it just doesn't, I'm just kind of giving you some thoughts here. So
the one thing that, before I call on you, Bella, I'm just going to respond to one thing Cliff said. The one thing that makes me, I don't want to say frustrated, but leery, maybe is the word, is leery, is that we know that the current budget, should we roll it forward, is missing key functions. Like, I'll just illuminate the communication specialist, which has probably come up twice a week and 3 times on Sundays about like this gap, right? I literally think that half the emails are like, we don't have the communication specialist. So to presume that a level service budget is appropriate, I think is a serious, it almost sets the window of okay at the wrong place, because we know that we cut, for example, there's the civil rights and bullying position, there's data. We have a whole lot of demands. We cut world language 2 years ago, right? There's a whole bunch of things that we have cut, particularly over the past 2 years, but even going back as far as 2020 with enrichment challenge support, things that were sort of hallmarks of the education offered that have been stripped out now, which I would consider to be still things that people would maybe consider continuing. So I'm just concerned about using the 2020, whatever year we're in right now, 6 budget as some sort of moment in time by which we should be judging a level service budget. I'm not saying there's an answer there, Cliff. You don't have to necessarily respond.
But I think it's important that I do respond, okay? Because I'll tell you that this is what the committee has asked for. All right. And the committee, if the committee doesn't get it,
I'm not saying they shouldn't get it.
Okay,
I guess I'm saying bringing it out first without these other things almost anchors it as the status, as the thing to now, it becomes the Overton window of the discussion, and I'm not sure that's appropriate.
Well, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion, first of all, because I don't think that that's necessarily the conversation that's been had at the committee. And people have to start someplace. And for us to start with FY26 and all this other stuff added into it, that's not starting with, that
I
doesn't
wasn't
help.
saying only do the program improvements one. I'm saying they could possibly be done in parallel. But anyway, why don't we turn it over to Bella, because I know she had her hand up partway through your comments.
I understand. I do understand that the place to start is with a level services budget, just because when you talk about budgets, it's easier for people to follow, like what was funded for this year, what's level services, and just to have that comparison. We would certainly create a category. I guess I would call it restoration. I wouldn't call it an improvement, but I might call it a category of restoration. And I'm also hoping that there will be some space for us to possibly present some improvements. And then that doesn't mean, it's just for you to see what might be proposed. It doesn't mean you have to approve them in the final budget that you want to carry forward. What I heard the question to me was that I had said level funded, not level funded, level
I
services.
misspoke.
Yeah, so
No,
I
it's
just
level-
want to be,
Yes,
yeah,
I
level
apologize.
services.
It's level service. Yeah, it's level
Yeah.
service, and that's
Okay.
even in the presentation materials for tomorrow.
Yeah,
You
that's
can
my
see
Alright, so
apologies.
I just that I wanted to pop in to
No,
make
it's fine.
sure it was level services. And yes, there can be a category of restoration, and there may be a category of improvement. And of course, we have to be cognizant of what a non-override budget looks like and what a possible override budget would look like.
Bella and Susan, I'll call on you in 1 second, Donna, but Bella and Susan, will you be presenting 3 years worth of budgets? How many years out will you be presenting? Because it's a 3-year override cycle, one would presume.
I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what Susan,
I would say
Yeah.
for a projection, typically we give a 3-year because reliability after 3 years is limited. But the town is asking for 5. And the challenge with that is the out years are less and less reliable, and people typically then want to hold you to whatever your 4 and 5 year are. I don't think it's best practice, but that's what the town is asking from us.
Thank you. Donna, you had your hand up, I think, before, and then we'll go to Sarah.
I might sort of have my answer, but I was actually wondering, Cliff, if you I think you make, you know, everything you're saying makes a lot of sense, but Mariah makes a good point. Like there are things that we took out that are sort of like critical to the operation. And so I'm just wondering what you think of the suggestion that there's like this restoration budget, because I think that is important to be communicated. So in your mind, how does that get communicated?
So again, I think I'm not doing a good job of sort of explaining, I guess.
No, I think you are. I just wonder, yeah.
Let me finish. Let me say it like this. I personally don't think that what we're talking about in terms of the level service budget has anything to do with what people anticipate actually being proposed as an override request. And I would be surprised if anyone is going to look at either the town level service or the school's level service and say, okay, well, that's our no override situation as well. I don't think that's the purpose of what we're asking for. The purpose of what we're asking for is just to have a starting point that isn't muddied by other information. And that's the purpose. That's all it is. So I feel like there's sort of an overreaction to what's kind of been asked as this first step. And I would just encourage you to relax a little bit, because that's serious. And I mean that. I think the bigger discussions, the bigger challenges are not going to be, and we've asked for this like in September, which obviously doesn't, leave a lot of time, but the committee has to start doing something. And it can't start doing something until it has something it can actually evaluate. And I think everyone understands and appreciates that the real discussion is going to kind of start maybe somewhere in November, hopefully, maybe early December. But to even when we get there, by having this level service information, it will give people the opportunity to look at things, and then as they're looking at alternatives and options in terms of revenues and efficiencies, whatever it might be, it's just going to help inform folks. But if we are waiting until December to get anything, there will not be an override.
To me, that sounds like an overreaction to go from September to December, but let's wait and
well, yeah, I'm sorry, Mariah. I mean, you can ask your colleagues. There is nothing that the committee has been able to look at. Nothing. And you can't look at coming in December during the holiday season when you know what the select board has to do. And the committee has to present and deliver its findings in January. So
thanks, Cliff. Bella, go ahead.
Yeah.
And then we'll go back to you, Sarah.
I have to log off for another meeting that started at 6 o'clock. So I just want to explain that. I hear you, Cliff, but we cannot give you anything that is a true budget till later. But we will put it together as soon as we can, as I feel like we can do it with some fidelity. Right. I'm sorry, I have to.
No problem, Bella.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Bella.
Sarah, go ahead. I see your hands up.
Just wanted to check my understanding. So I think that, we have a new superintendent. She has a new set of skills that she's brought into us where, we want to have the conversations that she wants to have. So I think that I separate out this level of service budget that Cliff has helped us try to understand a little bit better from the budget that we will be hoping to get from Bella, and hopefully will allow her to continue on programs that we've started on and also consider presenting some of her own cuts. Because my understanding is that the superintendent makes a budget that she presents to the school committee, and then we vote on line items. And I want to make sure that we still honor her piece in this. Is that a correct understanding of how the process goes?
I thought she makes recommendations. Mariah, you can test my knowledge here, but I thought this exercise or what we're embarking on is creating the memo that will maybe guide that process for Bella.
That was my question coming up with my hand. Exactly.
Yep, so
Is
this
that-
is
I
about the
thought we were-
guidelines. It doesn't say that she can't add in other stuff. It asks us to
Sure.
articulate our desires for what shows up in the budget.
Right, and
So
I
I
would,
don't
I
think
would
the two
add
things
that,
are at odds with each other, unless we were to say to her, only these things and nothing else, which I don't think we would say. So I could be wrong. But I think both of these things can happen. We can articulate our priorities, and then just as in prior years, you know, staff make other adjustments where they think where they think are appropriate to recommend as well. Does that help answer the question, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that you're showing me that you're sort of along the same thinking as what I thought was the process.
Yeah. Jesse, so your hand is sorted out, Jesse, because that was the same question you had.
well, I guess my comment was I thought that the output of this discussion was going to be a memo. Is
It'll be a
is
draft
that-
of a memo.
Right.
And for us to talk about at the committee, and again, I think it ties to,
Yes.
we can have a conversation about the override tomorrow night too. We're gonna get a report from the committee, from the
Yes.
liaisons.
Yes.
And really all these conversations go into like, what is this memo gonna look like? Now, last year when finance subcommittee put together the memo and it went to full subcommittee, there was quite a bit of revision, which makes sense because obviously the full committee has a lot of input as well as to what they want to see in the memo, and that's great. But this gives us the skeleton, and in my mind, like we had other categories in prior years, but the wording that Bella used, for example, restoration versus new, is to me is a very helpful framework to think about and help differentiate for the community what we see as we couldn't fund it, but it really is part of the program that we think is a gap versus new initiatives. So that's where I'm going in my head right now, but I think the first draft I would bring back to you all after tomorrow's conversation for your feedback. Then if we like it, then we send it to the full committee. And again, like we'll iterate as much as we need to before it goes to the full committee. With that said, Susan really wants this document by like the end of this month, ideally October at the very latest. So we don't want to twiddle our thumbs, you know, on the whole thing, especially this year. To Cliff's point, we want to make sure that the budget's moving ahead as quickly as it can, and we're not the holdup for what staff needs to do. So
So to follow up on that, who writes it says from school committee, but is that coming from finance? Is that coming
it
from
comes
Val?
from finance, so perhaps you and I can jointly put it together, write it, and then and it comes from everyone because we will vote it at the end as a committee.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah. Susan, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out, of course, if you're going with a multi-year guideline, that for me to cost out some of the things in the out years, I kind of have to know whether they're in or they're out. And that is the part that, you know, takes more time. Level service, I have to set up a model. The good news is, and what I'm waiting for, frankly, is to see the FY25 close so that I can have some good data when I'm doing forecasting. You know, FY23 is 24 is a bit better, and 25 is my strongest data in terms of me really feeling like I know it's under the hood. So doing a level service, you know, will be a theoretical model, right? It's not going to be a budget, right? When you're doing forecasting, but it will include the components. But if I'm going to add, for example, in year 28, I'm just using this example before us, world language, I'd need to know that I'm costing that out, right? If I'm doing an actual forecast that includes the expenses that we intend to achieve our vision and goals. So I just want to make note of that. We do have the restoration. When the school committee took votes this last year, they paused this, they paused that. They paused this. So clarity, I think tomorrow night around pausing versus cutting. The majority of the cuts were not cuts, they were pauses. I need to have clarity on that as I'm approaching this work. Because when I do the model, I don't have the time to do it over and over and over and over again, right? I need to create it in a way that incorporates the components that we want to include. So I just wanted to say that our guideline has been multi-year. They're looking for a multi-year projection. I can do run rate type of projections for level service. But that doesn't mean that it's really level service in some ways because of the manner in which we approach some of the reductions last year. So wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Sarah, and then Donna.
So Mariah, I take it that you don't want to hear suggestions from us right now of what we think should go into the guidelines, or you do?
No, you can. This is it. Like, yep.
All right.
Have at it.
So, I think that we started down the road of literacy. We know that we have already purchased some materials there. We need to continue that. I would consider that something that I would want to communicate to Bella that is extremely important to us. We have a middle school review of the schedule to go back to get equity across the board for time on learning in different academic subjects. I would consider putting that. And I want to just bring everybody up to speed about world language because it's been thrown out there, is to have everybody remember that the program that we had funded at the level that we had it didn't work for us. So if we were going to be bringing back a world language program, that is not a solution. It would have to be we would have to expand upon the prior model in order to make it worth learning.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Donna?
So I have some like thoughts of what I would want to put in the memo, but I was hoping actually, Susan, I can lean on your expertise. I know you in the central office in general, everyone's running on a really tight bandwidth and it's kind of a lean and mean machine in the central office these days. But if you were writing the memo, what would the architecture of this memo be? Would you have it be a multi-year thing? Like how would you advise us, if you could, to lay this out? Susan, that's for you. You had a dream world, sorry.
And she's muted though.
You're still muted, Susan. There you go. Wait, where'd you go? Oh, there she is.
I was basically just asking if it was you writing this memo to make you and your team as efficient as possible, like make this process as efficient as possible in terms of the memo and the work that you need to do as a result of the memo, how would you lay out this memo? Like what would the actual architecture of it be? Would you be looking at multi-year thing? Like,
Can I ask your question a little bit differently,
yes,
Donna?
please.
Which
I
is,
told you,
is there
okay.
any adjustments you need to the structure of the memo to make it useful, Susan? Like, or is it okay as is? We don't necessarily need you to rewrite it if you're okay with, if it's been functional enough for you to get what you needed to get where you needed to go.
Yeah, I'm just saying clarity around, like I said, for the purposes in front of us. I think it's important if there's something in 26, 27, or 28 or 29 that I need to include, that it would be nice to know what like priorities in that regard. To Sarah's point, like as an example, to add world language, to do an analysis on that means that not only do we have to add the teachers back, we would have to expand the school day for kids. And then it would be costing out the impact that may have on our collective bargaining agreement, right? Because all teachers would then have to work a longer day. That's a pretty involved, analysis component. So if there needs to be a conversation amongst the committee as to whether world language is something in the next 3 years you really, and also we have negotiations coming up. So I think there's a lot of conversations to be had when we're making our assumptions, but having clarity at least around the programmatic pieces I'm including would be helpful. Yeah, like I said, if it's restoring all paused positions, then I know what those were, for example. And then if I'm including that in the base, or if I'm separating that out, and then I could do like, based on what our current body of expenses are that were approved, this is that. And then the paused positions, I guess I could do it separately, to get level service in two buckets. But I just need to know, just have some clarity around that, Mariah, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And if there's something in particular that's expected in an order of priority. Because I think that would be important to have that information.
Robin, are you here still?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, well, I would just say if it's really stuff. Okay.
Sorry about that. My mouse moved. Sorry.
Okay. So in last year's guidelines, Robin, we did have reinitiating world language, and the time frame that was articulated there was, I think, I'm not looking at it right now because we're talking, but I think it was 28. And the reason
Yeah.
that was that Jody said 26 current year was going to be focused on literacy, 27 would be needed to basically plan how to make world language happen again, then to launch it in 28. And this whole blah 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 is basically like, will you be able, I think what we're going to need at some point is a plan for what world language could look like, because the committee, at least last year's version of the committee, voted it to include to return it for 28. So I don't know what this year's committee will do, but I would not be surprised, and I think it would be a good decision to start to cost out or to look at how it could work. I know we had also talked about one point, alternative models. For example, what if the K through, I'll say the earlier grades were offered as like an after school opportunity, and we didn't try to return them into the day, to, I'll say, to the academic day. And so I think all I guess I'm saying, Robin, is that like there might be the model that Susan proposes would be incredibly expensive and complicated and require bargaining. And perhaps there's other models to achieve the goal that look different. And maybe that would be an opportunity to explore. Does that sound, Sarah, I'm calling on you. Does that sound like a good recap of our conversation? And what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that I would add that, Robin, some work has been done, some thinking, not work, some thinking around these issues has already been done. And so we wouldn't be turning to you. Actually, I have to tell everybody that I got kicked off out of the call for a second. So if I say something that doesn't match up, please let me know, because I did miss a bit of what Mariah said. But in general, Robin, I think it's important to know that some of the thinking has already been done and that we need to catch you up to where we are in that thinking. Now speaking to my colleagues, I hesitate, as important as world language instruction is to me and is to our town, I hesitate to put that into our guidelines. I have to really be honest, because I don't think that we have so much we have to address.
I don't have my hand up, but I'll just say, Sarah, I feel that really resonates for me. So I feel similarly to you. And I was thinking that I know that this document has to have like actual substantive things in it that Susan needs to work off of. But I also think a portion of it really needs to capture our intent to be committed to like the student-centered work, to academic excellence, to providing opportunities to all students. And then from there, I don't know, like in my brain, the way I work, then I would work backwards from there, like that's the vision, and then work backwards from that vision.
Susan, and then I want to make a comment.
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of things that have been talked about over the time I've been here, world language being one, but middle school model and equity being another. There are, to Sarah's point, many challenges, and I think one of the one thing I don't think we want to lose in terms of an opportunity is that though 3 of the 4 of the cabinet members are interim, they're also very knowledgeable, experienced, bright and passionate educators that have a whole wealth of experience. And I think that senior leadership will have some interesting thoughts on things that we can do. And so perhaps as you approach the guidelines, making space for some recommendations might be in order, and in order in which you might want to consider them, because adding something like world language is certainly laudable, but I think there are some core programmatic components that need to be attended to. And your middle school model in some fashion has to be addressed. And so I would hope that in whatever way we proceed, that we don't lose sight of some of these other things that are really important, that at some point in time, and hopefully within the next 3 years, you address, because they're perennial challenges that Brookline has had. Some of these other things are fantastic and nice to have, but addressing some of the weaknesses in programming, I would hope would take precedent over some of the things that are amazing, but maybe not amazing at the expense of not addressing some of the challenges that have been documented that don't appear on this document.
Thank you, Susan, for reminding us that sometimes the most expensive thing is the plumbing, even if it's not the most exciting thing that you have to fix in your house.
Mari, do we have a list of those items?
Of which items? The plumbing like items, the sort of structural
The ones that Susan was alluding to, but like didn't specify what they are.
that's a great question, because I would say that they're more baked into the strategic plan, a lot of those, and what the guidelines does, it basically, because the strategic plan is really the anchor for where the district is going, and it talks about things like curriculum, scheduling, and a lot of these sort of, I will call them the formative issues that a district needs to do well.
MTSS is there as well.
Yep, and I think a lot of our guidelines, like the things that we added, tended to be things that were more leading. I'll say in like, it was an issue that came up since the strategic plan, or it was something that 1 year dipped and we wanted to make sure it got corrected. Whereas we saw the strategic plan as really being the bulk of that work.
Right.
So I think that should maybe that answers your question, Jesse, about where these things are.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that they're clearly listed in like a 10 things we need to do kind of format.
Right, that's what I mean, if those are the real core ones, they may or may not overlap with restorational kinds of ideas, but we should document them nonetheless and then determine how to prioritize them.
I
Especially
wonder, Susan, Robin, and Karen, is it possible for you to put together like that sort of, these are the key things shortlist?
And maybe not in great detail, just.
No, exactly. Just like a
punch
fixed
list.
middle school timing, like, whatever these things are that you're sort of pointing out, like, these are the things, like, keep your eyes on the prize. Because that might just be helpful, again, is like, everyone understands that, this is the top 5 or the top 8 or the whatever that top list is. I think that when you say them, we will all nod, but having them sort of just boiled down, like as an easy to refer to list, might be very valuable for the committee and the community to really understand what makes the whole thing sing.
Yep.
Does that sound reasonable, a short list like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
do.
yeah,
Very makes sense.
Yep.
yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and probably again, it's all in the strategic plan and we'll all nod our heads and say, of course, but I think it's again helpful as a reminder and a short list.
Mariah, I would also just add Bella to that if she.
Yeah, she's just not here, which is why. I
No, no,
didn't-
no, I
yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
know. I just want to be clear that of
Yeah.
course we would also want Bella's,
Yes.
whatever it is, top 3, top 5, and again, just like in punch list
Right.
even.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. I wanted to ask, and Robin, I think this is a question for you. And this is about something I brought up earlier, which is the district removing enrichment and challenge support in 2020, which was sort of a, I'll say, it was enrichment and challenge support was a replacement for gifted and talented programs a while before, and it was this idea of broadly accessible rather than exclusionary. And I think that there is a big push in the Brookline community, and I understand some of the, the thinking around this for bringing these programs back. And I'm wondering, have you had the opportunity to consider that at all? Has that come up? I don't want to put you on the spot, so feel free to say, I'm not ready to answer this question.
I'm not ready to answer that question.
Okay.
But I have heard about the removal of those programs at one point in time, so.
I think it will be something that will definitely come up, and I'm interested in hearing and how we can make sure that we're providing an education for every student, no matter where they're at in their educational journey. And so to the extent that some type of those programming combinations or something else that you would recommend fit into that, I'm really curious. And I think there's probably other members of the committee who are curious to hear about what that could look like as well.
Got a note.
Yeah. Anything, we're at 6:34 and you know how much
No.
I hate to run over. So unless there's anything else burning that we need to talk about for today, I'm going to say thank you for this good initial conversation about guidelines. And we're going to continue our conversation tomorrow anyways, as part of the report out at expenditures and revenues and what an override could look like.
I'm sorry that I'm just going to say for new business, one of the things that's come up, when we made all of our different cuts, I'd just like to point out that not having any funding for any of the school committee members or the superintendent to go to MASC means that we're not able to network there for a new superintendent. So just wanted to put that into your mind as something to talk about at some point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan and Robin and Karen and Cliff
Yes.
and Mariah.
Thank you.
and
All
Susan.
of you. It was a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.